You are my sadness and my hope, but mostly you are my love. Real talk, I shouldn't be tearing up in no damn Marvel show. I need to ease up. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to that channel, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you'll be the first to know. A lot of y'all mad. Y'all mad. Y'all mad. Who knew episode 9 of WandaVision, the series finale, would be so divisive? You guys, this is why I've never really done that here, gotten so wrapped up in your theories and what you wanted and what you needed, what you wanted to see, that you didn't just let the show be what it is. And anyone who really starts their conversations with the phrase, "It was okay, but I would have wanted it to do this or I wanted to do that," it's not your damn show. You don't get to say. The creators, the showrunners, the folks at Marvel did what they wanted to do, and what they created was a beautiful story about grief. So this being a introduction to the mutants, this being an introduction to Mephisto, all of that is irrelevant. What they told was a story about a woman suffering through grief. And as a person who himself has had I've been where Wanda's been, where you're just in it. The world around you doesn't matter. You insulate, you isolate, you cut people off, you piss people off, and you were just in your bubble of just pain and grief. And what this episode shows from start to finish, how Wanda had to live in her grief, be in her grief, sometimes hide or cope with the grief, but then at the end of it, come out on the other side and being able to finally get past all the pain and grief that she's in to sort of butterfly cocoon off into the new person that she is, which is a badass. Because that new Scarlet Witch outfit, kudos to you costume designers. Kudos. So let's dive in a little bit to the episode for the series finale. Wanda and Agatha pick up right after the end of the last one, where they're going tit for tat in the middle of the street, and Agatha, as we know, basically wants Wanda to use her powers so that she can absorb them and sort of take them all in. We get a play on the tit for tat. We see some big action sequences. This is where all of that, although I think the black and white and going through the sets of the sitcoms burned through some of that budget. This episode is where all the budget of WandaVision went. This is a big 40-minute spectacle of a film. We get to see Vision versus Vision, which is the trolling that the genius trolling that Paul Bettany did, saying he got to work with somebody that he never got to work with. He's not lying. It's himself. Which was fun. We got to see some good witch on witch battles between Agatha and Wanda. We got to see a little bit of her twins getting into the battle and fighting. And we got to see a little bit of Monica using her powers to sort of help and save and get into it too. I think all in all, though, for me, the points that hit the most for me in this episode are the emotional beats. I love, and this is why I always love sort of what Marvel has done. They'll take these big action spectacles, but they'll have moments to pause and sort of just reflect and think and do some stuff that is just more, it's just better than punch, punch, kick, smash, smash. I have three key moments in this episode that sort of stick out to me emotionally. One of them is the Vision on Vision, not the actual fights, but the actual moment when the two of them are just having a conversation and talking. And Vision from the Hex and Vision from the real world, just kind of deciphering what they are and who they are and what that all means. And what ends up happening is Vision Hex sort of unlocks Vision from the real world, the now white Vision, and sort of unlocks his memories. His emotion is still wiped. He still has no emotional connection to anybody or anything, but he at least now knows where he's come from, and that allows him to just go off into the world. So we do now have a real Vision that exists in a world where we don't really get a resolution for him in this series, but I think we will see Paul Bettany in some form or another as Vision, a less emotional Vision, but a more straightforward. This is what we get, which is always good, because while they did say goodbye in this episode, it is not, for the two of them, is not a permanent, this is set in the stand goodbye. There could be a world where Wanda and Vision do get back together. which leads to one of my second emotional points of this show. It's the goodbye. It's so well done, but her kissing her kids and tucking them in, and then them switching as parents. Just something so subtle about them, like basically shaking hands and doing the tag off. So she goes to the other kid, tucks them in, and closes the door, and her like, "Thank you for choosing me as your mother." While she closes the door, and you can see the hex closing in, and just knowing that on the other side of that door, they're just getting taken away. It's some beautiful and painful stuff, you know. And then just the goodbye that Wanda and Vision have at the window, watching the hex come to them, and this Vision sort of trying to get some understanding of what or whom he is, and Wanda finally being able to break down how she did it or what she did to create this version of Vision. And he kind of litanies off the many versions that he's existed before as, and sort of is kind of cool. It's like, this is goodbye for now, but we will see each other in some form again. I love that. And my third one, I really love just how it plays, is when Wanda leaves the hex after everything is done, everybody's gone. Westview is sort of back to being normal. She leaves the hex, and all the folks that she's been in control of, or had their kids locked away, or couldn't see their loved ones, are just giving her the massive stink eye. It's just the stink eye of all stink eyes, and it's great because while we all know her as heroic, what she's done to them is villainous, and it is bad, and they should be angered for her. But there is one person, Monica, who she goes to and is like, they're gonna be pissed, but I understand what you did, because if I had the power like you do to bring my mother back, I'd do it. And that was powerful for me as a person who's lost their mother when I was young. That is something that you're like, yeah, I get it. While you may have hurt a lot of people and put a lot of people in precarious positions, I understand why you did what you did. There's a couple of things I did not like about the episode, and they're small. One, Kat Dennings is just underused. It feels like they got her in the hex, and unfortunately didn't know how to use Darcy anymore, because she just comes in and drives a truck into Hayward and then just disappears. We don't really get a closure on her in physical form. We get a line read that's said about what happens to her, but we don't see her. So it's just kind of weird that she was not in episode 8 at all, which nobody has is fine, but then not really in episode 9. She just has a small little cameo part, basically, which is odd. And then I know the part that a lot of people have been sort of hammering on is the whole Pietro boner situation of it all. It's interesting. It's probably the one thing that I actively don't like about the entire series, and I didn't need him to be a mutant or I need him to be a throwaway. It just seems like this is you've cheapened it, but you also made this a gag, and it just feels unnecessary for not leading anywhere. But it's still fun because you still do play with that. I think in my brain, the way that this works is that Agatha, in some world, some universe, saw Pietro as it was in the X-Men world. And saw in this world, or this Earth, or this multiverse, that actor looks a lot like what that Pietro did. So she just used her magic and put him on the board. And that's what you get with Boner. So I think it doesn't necessarily close off the board, that I know a lot of people are like, oh, the mutants are coming, or this at least merges the worlds. But it does show that there is a world where those type of mutants and that stuff exist. And they're kind of just playing with the parallels of it all, and that this could bring here. But I do, while I am not mad that mutants are introduced, because I don't think that's what this show is about, that's not the point of this series, I do think that was sort of a foul misdirect to use. If you're going to bring this in, you should do a little bit more with it. But I like that they did not take Agatha completely off the board. She's still around. She's locked away. For those of you who don't quite understand, because my wife sort of had a question about it, when the hex is destroyed, Agatha is still there now as a nosy neighbor living in that neighborhood. So she's not aware of who she is or what she is, but she is there now living in the trapped world, while Westview proper, the original one, is back. So at some point in time, hopefully she sort of is like the Loki of this. She gets to come back in some form or fashion. And then Monica. Monica doesn't really have a lot to do in this episode. She sort of just comes in, does her thing, and goes away. We also don't really get to see her in full superhero form. I'm not that mad at it. This isn't her show. This show belongs to Wanda. It's WandaVision's. We sort of start the process of Monica and whatever superhero name she chooses to go with. But I think that we clearly see that there's a future for her. We know she's going to be in Captain Marvel too, and based on the post-credit sequence, it looks like she's also going to be a part of Nick Fury's Secret Invasion show, because we see a little bit of the Skrulls coming to contact her to say that somebody above is waiting to have a discussion with her. I think everybody sort of believes that's Nick Fury. I am in that same boat. I think when she says he, I think that is the person that she is speaking of up there, holding down the fort, waiting for her. And then there's the other post-credit that we should discuss is with Wanda sort of doing the Doctor Strange thing where she's studying up on that Darkhold, which we all sort of, I said earlier in the video, that's what that was. They just flippantly like, yep, it's a Darkhold. Deal with it. But she's using the Darkhold to study while she's dealing and just sitting and reflecting and kneeling in her grief. I don't know how good of a thing it is that Scarlet Witch in full Scarlet Witch mode is powering up and learning her stuff without sort of being in control. I think that is how it sort of leads into Doctor Strange for someone who actively tracks and is aware of all powered folks on Earth. That's going to bring a red flag to Strange, and he's going to be like, okay, what the hell are you doing, Wanda? It's interesting because the two of them never really had any interaction. They were on the battlefield. They're really on opposite sides. They're not really around each other at the same time. They are at the funeral together, but I don't know if they really had any interaction. So it's going to be interesting to see how they sort of interact with each other, both being super, super powered, probably the most two powerful folks left on the board in the MCU. I thought this was a phenomenal finale. I think the story that they were trying to tell here in WandaVision, they got to tell without doing and appeasing all these other folks. They've had this story written. This is always going to be a lead into Doctor Strange. It's supposed to be directly after. Unfortunately, COVID sort of messed the shooting schedule up, but I think we will get there eventually. But I think this is a beautiful love story to folks who have to deal with grief through the eyes of Marvel, and I think it was handled perfectly from start to finish. I did not have a problem with the black and white Dick Van Dyke-esque episodes all the way to the very end. It was a fun, entertaining, and emotional ride from start to finish, and I think Elizabeth Olsen needs to be commended because she handled everything that they threw at her with such ease, care, and just amazing acting ability. I don't think we'll ever come back to a world where we get a second season of WandaVision. This feels like it was designed just to be a one-off. Anyone who reads comics, you get them sort of in one-shots or miniseries. I think this is a miniseries to sort of establish that character, put Scarlet Witch in her true form on the board, put Monica on the board, and establish Skrulls, and sort of put Sword on the board, and get those folks established before we move on to the next part of whatever Marvel is trying to give us. And I think, I hope, if nothing else, this series, before we start getting into the Lokis and the Falcon and the Winter Soldiers and the Hawkeyes or whatever we get, I hope this series allows people the ability to stop conjecturing and fantasizing and theorizing and just enjoy. I hope that the disappointment that folks have with this finale allow them now to take anything else that Marvel does for what it is as opposed to what they want it to be. What did you guys think about the series finale and the series as a whole for WandaVision? Go ahead and leave your comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name that's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that plays podcasts. We're there. We are currently doing, for our last episode of it, History of Sitcoms Through the Eyes of WandaVision with our guest host, Jamie Jurek, who we're hoping will be permanently there, but that is the plan. And then we also have a sister podcast called You Can't Do That Anymore, where we talk about classic films such as American Beauty, Back to the Future, Gone with the Wind, and discuss some of the things that they did back in the day when they were released to see if they can still do those things today through the eyes of 2021. But like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.